Welcome to Lewisham Unity, a place where we gather to rest and recharge and renew between one week and another, where we commit to shaping the future that we want to make, and where all of you, whomever you love, wherever you come from, wherever your ancestors come from, whatever spiritual path draws you and whatever you are searching for, you are welcome here.
I'm Reverend Julio Torres. My pronouns are he, him. So today, this is the initial workshop for series, which I'm working on, which is called Establishing Your Own Theology, Cosmology, based off of this particular book, Building Your Own Theology. So today, I want to give a bit of a groundwork. This is the initial piece of work, and this book assumes that you will have purchased it, read through it, engaged with it in several weeks in a row, and then continue to build on it as kind of a lifetime activity. So what I'm trying to do today is get you a few of the key points from the book, also respecting copyright boundaries. So I've tried to recreate a few things in a more abstract sense, but also give a few tips into how to engage with certain things. Again, as you will not have a reference material with you to reflect on, or remind you. So this work of building your own theology, establishing your own cosmology, it's an emotional roller coaster. There's certain things to do that requires depth, requires emotional engagement, a bit of resilience. And so I would always say, contact, your local minister or myself, reach out to your community, whatever the case may be, because this is work. This is not just like an easy thing. Don't get me wrong, have fun with it, but it's a lot to dig into. So, for example, with today's topic, if the biggest part of it is writing a spiritual autobiography, and again, there's no way to go around it. The first task of it, again, if you choose to do it, again, you're not gonna see me force you to do anything. But if you decide to go through the steps, the first step is writing your birthday, and then writing a date where you expect to die, and then putting your line, little dots saying where you are now at this moment, in relation to all that. Just start. Again, as this is a lifetime activity, of course, that will continue to go forward. And so, for example, with that sort of activity, I almost recommend you do this, have your worksheets, which I will share links with, but also have a bit of a journal activity to go forward. But also, like I said, if you wanted to have your, your manifesto, your big document, have that kind of thing to the side as well. Because these are all tools to help with your spiritual development, your theological development, and just kind of, help with your spiritual well-being. Now, to even go into the topic of writing your birthday and the day you expect to die, this is something that I've been thinking about since the age of 12, or if I'm honest, even maybe the age of 4. And it was a rough exercise for me, and even though I had contemplated this question for decades. And that answer changed depending on which part of my life at some point I thought I was going to die at 25. At some point I thought maybe 80. These days I try to go for the hope of living like Bilbo Baggins from Lord of the Rings, 111 years. So, and also some of you may or not have gone through the Soul Deep workshops, whether with other Unitarian ministers or myself at Lewisham Unity, but if you have, again, those conversations, I think keep those notes, keep those things in mind. I think they will serve you well for this autobiography, this building your own theology, establishing your own cosmology work. That being said, also, again, I want to give credit to Richard S. Gilbert, author of this book. Again, put in a lot of work The book was written, yes, in 2000, or at least this edition was, and again, written for an American context, so for Unitarian Universalists. I think still very fruitful to this day. Even though certain things, for example, you'll see the values. He discusses the principles of the Unitarian Universalism, the seven principles. They were, in Unitarian Universalism for a while. If you haven't seen them, I highly recommend them. I love them to pieces. But even, for example, this year, the vote is to change these in Unitarian Universalists to go from seven principles to various values. I still think it's a rich theological foundation to draw from, even as the Unitarian Universalists documentation, shall we say, governance changes. He talks about the framework of theology and that we are all theologians, that we all have spirituality. Now, the question then ends up being, it's not, again, whether we're theologians or whether we have spirituality. The question is it a good spirituality, a bad spirituality? Is it developed? Is it abstract? And ultimately, that's up to us. And so he provides a method of engagement, shall we say. And I stand by what he says, where, regardless of your theological perspectives, your theological background, whether you're atheist, theist, liberal Christian, etc., the gateway to the divine, to spiritual health, spirituality, I feel is engaging first with ourselves, engaging with our journeys, and then seeing, as he says, what are our transactions? How do we engage? What are our relationships? What are our interaction with other areas? And so I'm just going to quickly share my screen for a second. So you should see on your screen a model of theology via Unitarianism. If you're watching this video, feel free to pause it, go through it. But to give you an explanation, the inner bit, again, borrowing from his models and pictures, I didn't want to have a copyright infringement. There's certain things I feel are free from copyright issues, but just to give a bit of a more openness to it, the core of the model of theology is that you start with your values, your principles, because that will then guide your journey, right? And it's one of those things, again, he suggests reflecting on Unitarian Universalist values and principles, reflect on your life's principles, reflect on the values of your family, friends, etc. All these things you hold sacred to yourself. If you need to have a workshop for that, let me know. You could Google values and see, a whole lot of values. Aristotle had this whole, what are virtues and vices? We're centering into some of these Catholic dogmas you see about what are virtues and vices. However you want to go into what your core is, let that be what guides your journey. And so that's the inner circle. The second middle circle, Richard Gilbert discusses what are the theological menu, the theological options, concepts, groundings of Unitarianism, kind of. And so he brings up these five major strands or five major roots of Unitarianism. We are, historically liberal Christianity, and that's grown over time to take on various shapes, but that is still the root of us. As we didn't come out of Buddhism, we didn't come out of Hinduism, we didn't come out of Islam, we didn't come out of a scientific, exploration, that delved into spirituality. We have Christian roots. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Whether we maintain Christian, whether you are a Christian, or whether you're a Christian, it's not the point of this. It's just to say that we have a liberal Christian rooting, and in the journey of Unitarianism developed religious humanism, and that was an engagement to say questioning the divinity of Jesus, etc. So many other things of science, humanity. What is an academic understanding of the Bible, for example, lessons from history, a historical critical method. We have this transcendentalist root, this reverence for earth and nature. And we gone into various directions of Unitarianism. For example, some of us will be kind of Wiccan Unitarians, for example. Some of us will just be very much like, we don't go to a church to pray and feel with God. We'll take walks in nature. There's many ways that impacts us. And then also mysticism, spirituality, have this direct relation to the divine. Again, we come out of this Protestant tradition. There is no gateways between you and the divine. There's no intermediary priest, Certainly, I, as a minister, am just here to help you with your journey. And if you want me to say a prayer, give a blessing, certainly happy to do so. But ultimately, it's you and the divine. And that's a very direct experience you should have. We would say you could have anyway. And then ultimately, the question of theism, liberal Christianity was theist. Again, whether they're atheist or theist, ultimately Unitarianism, as I call it here, we're agnostic on principle. We agree to disagree. Take that for what you will. And if you believe in a God, if you're a theist, the traditional sense of a God in an eternity outside of time, and we are, time-bound humans in this reality. Whether you're a panentheist, whether you're a pantheist, so many options to choose from. Ultimately, your knowledge of the universe will be dictated by whatever rational experiences you have, your senses, the empirical evidence, shall we say, any revelations, any feelings, or kind of just the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, some would say. The then establishing in this outer circle, these are theological topics to engage with, essentially 5 core areas. What is human nature? Kind of the topic of ethics, philosophy. What is meaning? What is your sense of meaning? The idea of how we engage with human history and the future of humanity. And again, the ultimate reality question, relating to, say, theism or the cosmos or the spirit source of creation, the source of love, etc. Now, I made 2 slides, which are essentially the same version. As I said, we start our spirituality from the center, ourselves, and how do we then engage? What are our transactions, our relationship with the ultimate reality, with human history and the beloved community? Ethics, again, dealing with the social nature of ourselves. How do we deal with us and institutions and the earth, and people in general, one to one? And then what is our deeper sense of self and meaning? What meanings do we make of our lives? He has a basic model of this, and so this is similar enough, but in his model, he also goes into certain values. I write a few here on the top of each of these squares, the orange, yellow squares. But then these are some deeper conversations to have, again, about human freedoms, a bit more in depth as to what ultimate reality is. Again, if this is too wordy for you, go back to the screen. But I want to pause for a second just to say that this is essentially how these workshops are going to go. First, we're going to delve into the self, and then workshop sequentially after that will deal with the ultimate reality, and then so forth to human history, ethics, and meaning. Again, this book assumes 10 workshops, about 2 hours long each, not in a worship service, and assuming a commitment to confidentiality, etc. I will be going through this in a bit more in depth to see how much we need and what I will be recording going forward, but certainly today we'll be discussing spiritual autobiography. Unitarian Universalist theology and Unitarianism encourages a rational approach, but there's this kind of dynamic where we can become more embodied and transcendent. We can be practical with our spirituality, but also aspirational. We shouldn't be stopping the dream, shall we say, even though reality crushes us on a regular basis. Unless you're privileged, in this case, enjoy reality. We Unitarians may have this liberal Christian historical roots, but again, we agree to disagree in a lot of things spiritually. But also, we learn from world religions. Many of us will have engaged in depth with, say, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism, Wicca, Sikhism. Again, so many religious traditions in the world that could go on and on. Santeria. Ultimately, this model doesn't say stop doing that. It's just to say that this is the roots of Unitarianism, and how you decide to explore it will be impacted by that if you decide to, do so. But it's certainly my training to help out with. I wasn't trained in the Quran as the same depth that I was trained in the Bible, for example. That's what I mean to say. Again, a nuanced point, because again, Unitarianism has developed into this very much agree to disagree. The source of truth is not just contained into the Bible, that we could find the divine inspiration, revelation anywhere. And that is a key theological point, that revelation is not closed. It is open. and continues to be open. So wherever you find revelation, you know, let that be a part of your theology. He discusses in one of these things that we're assuming to have read if you have owned the book. You are to start out with your spiritual odyssey, kind of discuss what are your transforming experiences. Um, Ultimately, what you could say and say a 10-minute speech if you had to give it, or a sermon. I mean, you could write a whole book of your life, obviously, and go for it if you have the time and energy and desire. He engages with those questions that, you imagine you would start with. What is spirituality? What is religious? And he would say that there's a spectrum of multidimensional things that spirituality encompasses, and there's millions of ways to say what is spiritual. There's a way to say that spirituality is a tingle in the gut. It's an ecstatic feeling of being born again. It could be just so many things. And then how do we engage our spirituality with, say, the government, with this technologically dominant world we live in? And ultimately, we as humans can't just flick spirituality on and off. What do we expect of a good spirituality? And it's one of those things. Even he talks about this icebreaker exercise to start out with. If we were, say, in person with name tags, etc., he says, in the upper left-hand corner of your name tag, to write a religious belief that you cherish. In the upper right-hand corner, one religious belief which you have rejected. Um, and then in the lower left-hand corner, he asks, to write the names of any religious communities that you may have been born in, or of course, if none, just say none. And the right hand, what is on the bottom right? What is one religious issue you'd like to explore? And I say that because, again, that goes to your values, your core principles, how we would discuss it as a group. If hopefully not just doing this by yourself. I mean, certainly start out, but engage with people. I think that's where Unitarianism shines. It's this engagement with people to, confidential, safe space to have the conversation, have reflections from you share, so people could learn from you, but also so you can learn from other people. And then he goes on to saying, spirituality, does it require us to be hermited monks? Ultimately, we are one people, right? As humanity. But however you decide to engage with transcendence, does spirituality require you to have this single discipline practice? Is a question he asks. Or do you have to read a certain text in certain ways to have spiritual health? Ultimately, the question being, how can we be spiritual while also being humans who have lives to live, chores to deal with? Ultimately, we live in a capitalist society. We have to pay the bills or risk being homeless, and that's the spiritual threat. You know, or dare I say, spiritual privilege. You know, he suggests, and I strongly agree with this, that we must recognize that spirituality is an art, not a science. There's certain things that does take practice, but he suggests, and I agree, we have to learn to ask the right questions. And Unitarianism is not about giving answers; it's about asking the right questions. And then ultimately, our spiritual health. How do we judge that? Do we have a spirituality that leads to isolation, self-destruction, or is it something that's a bit more positive and life-giving? And he reminds us the word enthusiasm is derived from Greek. It's an extravagant religious emotion, which literally comes from the phrase possessed by God. And can we laugh about life? Can we make jokes, about ourselves? We have all these contradictions and paradoxes and oxymorons. Spiritual health is one of these things where if we take ourselves too seriously, it might be an issue. Because we're going to have these inevitable tragedies in life, including our own deaths. How do we spiritually engage whilst also being socially responsible and engaging with social justice? Does our spirituality uplift us into larger frameworks of meaning so that we can have our life or see our life as a worthy project? Do we find joy in our actions? The things we do with our hands and our hearts. Do we put the everyday into this frame of context of spiritual health? All the minutia, all the joy, all the little things. So spiritual health enables us to celebrate life. These are the questions he suggests to discuss with, and these are ultimately, if you were to say not watch any more of these videos on building your own theology, establishing your own cosmology workshop, these are some of the questions to ask. And essentially everything else is going deeper into these topics. Some of these things, actually, I'm not going to share my screen. I'm going to discuss this because of copyright issues. He has, in this book, these worksheets to fill in. I would suggest, you're more of a audio person, maybe make yourself an audio journal. If you're okay with writing, write them out. If you prefer drawing and you're making a bit more of a comic response, whatever you need to do to engage with things. Again, use AI to your support if you want to do audio, and then it does the transcription. I'm just saying, do what you need to do, but you need something to reflect on and engage with in the future instead of just having it in your brain. Or even just talking out loud and just like, oh, it's a conversation. Like have something that you wrote that you can engage with in the future. Spiritual autobiography is a lifelong project, in my opinion. And a spiritual autobiography is something that's a tool I know he says is used in throughout these workshops to reflect on and delve deeper into various aspects of the future. Now, this worksheet, the spiritual autobiography, is very much write a page or two. This is not to write the dissertation of your life at the moment, but delve deeper into in the future. But just at least get some initial thoughts on paper to then reflect on, because he gives the spiritual homework of writing a more in-depth spiritual autobiography. Well, he says a few things, and there's some things I paraphrase, and I can't recall which at the moment. But your religious life story is your own. No one can tell you how to present it, but narrative is such a central part of the religious quest. And so the following are some guidelines, some points to delve into that might help you with your own spiritual autobiography. And one thing, actually, from my own notes, I would say, if you want to have a bit of fun with this, because I say have a bit of fun because it's a very serious topic. If you do want to use AI to maybe make a bit of good times, ask it to do something fun like take your autobiography and then say write it in the style of Shakespeare, or for example, Lin-Manuel Miranda's musicals like Hamilton or In the Heights, for example. Just whatever you decide to do, just have a bit of fun because this can be, wow, a spiritual gut punch. And like I said before in the beginning, the first task of the spiritual autobiography is to write your lifeline, your timeline. You can put your date of birth on one side and the date you expect to die on the other side. And this, he suggests a reasonable estimate. And again, obviously, if you have a life-threatening illness, it's a bit more shorter lifeline, but you might want to use a national life expectancy. You may, again, I suggest 111 years like Bilbo Baggins. Why not? And then he asks you to discuss and write down, how do you feel about this? So this is where, if you want to take a moment to do this, I would say pause the video, put a little timer of 5 minutes, and then come back. Make the assumption that you've paused. We'll say now the next topic it's called life functions in space. So he asks you to identify the places in which significant things have happened to you. And he says we might call this process mapping the spirituality of the spirit of life. Your life, I mean to say. This is an aside from me. As a former business analyst, I love process mapping. And so I would suggest to you have various swim lanes to either each deal with, say, for example, years of your life, maybe group them into decades of your life if you prefer, or if you feel like you have a connection to places. Maybe put like the places you've lived in. You say you prefer to categorize your life into jobs you've had. Maybe put them into jobs. Um, if you feel so obligated, maybe you could even put, say, little diamond decisions you've had to make in your life. Um, in the boxes of your life, so you'll have like little circles that says start, born, make an arrow to say things you did, completed primary school, completed high school, I don't know, whatever your life story may be. Those boxes, try to have them as verb, noun. So again, completed high school, um, uh, finished science degree, something to that effect. Um, and then just keep going until your current position. And if you're feeling really feisty, even go into what you expect to see in your life. Maybe, um, maybe family goals, retirement, places you want to travel, what have you. And then put the little endpoints, if you want, and maybe a question mark, or you could put the date you chose on the top right for your date of your death, whatever the case may be. Also, I would say for the things that are in the future that you're not sure about, put like a little dashed line just to show that, these are the things you definitely have facts for the past, but for the future, dash, kind of uncertainty, hopes, etc. And this is where I would say pause the video, put another timer for 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. Assuming you pause the video. The next topic. All life is meeting others. So here you would put a section, who are 3 or 4 people who have had the greatest impact on your life? And then write why. And again, this is assuming real people you've met, whether it be physically or digitally. Again, this isn't, people that you've met in your dreams or people from history you wish you could have met. Like literally a human had an impact on your life and why. So this is where I would say again, pause the video, take 5 or 10 minutes. Um, the next the next workshop I know in the book is to share autobiographies. I won't share mine at the moment. So again, I've assumed you've paused the video for 5 to 10 minutes, and we'll go on to the next topic, which is experiences shape our religious faith. So what were 2 or 3 formative experiences in your life? Why are they important to you? Again, some of us may call these religious experiences, spiritual experiences. Again, start with 2 or 3. Your autobiography, you could write a whole lot more, but try to categorize the big ones. Again, I assume you're going to pause the video. 5 to 10 minutes have passed. The next topic is we live in communities. Now, this question is which communities, again, religious, not religious, doesn't matter, just a community of people you've been engaged with, have had a lasting influence on your development. And again, this could be school, volunteer, work, the spiritual community, however you want to define communities. I assume a minimum of 2 to 3 people. Um, maybe put your family, maybe put like an ethnic group that you've engaged with. Um, Friendship, for example, my wife is ethnically Gujarati, so she's been involved with like the Gujarati societies, uh, Hindu temples, for example. Um, if you're LGBT, this might be you know uh, local LGBT groups. Maybe you like the pub. Maybe you're a big fan of sports. I'm not sure. Again, I'll assume you have paused the video for 5 to 10 minutes. The next topic is we are choosing creatures. So again, think of the important decisions of your life. Discuss what they meant to you. How were they made and the results? And that's the key phrase. How were they made and the results? So in your process map, you may have put a few life decisions you made, but in this case, definitely discuss your life decisions, delve into your logic behind it, your reasoning behind it, the feelings you made, for that decision. I'll assume you pause for 5 to 10 minutes. The next topic is life is made of joy and sorrow. So list a few of the happiest and saddest experiences of your life. And if you want to make two columns, I hope you've had more joy than sorrow, but be honest and transparent. These affect your spirituality. These will affect the relationship you have with the divine, with people, with humanity, with your own sense of meaning. This is, again, it's lovely to write out the celebratory things, but also I understand that the sadder, grieving parts are a bit heart-wrenching. So take your time. I say 5 to 10 minutes, only if this is easy to you. If you need to come back and then write, I understand. So I assume you pause the video. You've given your 5 to 10 minutes. I hope you did okay with this part. The next session, the next topic is a master story. So each of us has a master story, a theme that summarizes our life endeavors. So try to discern your master story, see what theme you may have for your life thus far. This is kind of the reflection of the Odyssey and maybe discerning the theological values that have informed you. Um, we'll say when I did this, workshop online, I said there's a few of us that had issues with a master story. But I would say even if you can't discern one in the moment, the next 5 to 10 minutes, have a reflection on it. Again, if you don't end up having a master story, that's perfectly fine. But maybe try to theme up sections of your life to say what kind of things were going on. And if not, it's perfectly fine. Put no master story. That does go into your theological values to say that maybe you've had no master story. That's okay. As an aside, and not part of this workshop, spiritual health, spiritual well-being, in my opinion, has the topics of purpose, meaning, hope, and connection. Being able to decide a master story kind of goes into the sense of meaning or your sense of general purpose. So I would say it's something to reflect on if you feel like you don't have a master story, but also maybe you're still, young in life and still trying to figure things out. And so maybe you shouldn't have a master story because your whole point is just to live life, go to school, figure things out, find a job, just a sense of stability to become a grown up. And I'm 37 now, and sometimes I feel like, what? Why am I still trying to figure things out? But you never know. I'm I'm content with my master story thus far, and I'm sure my master story will change 20 years from now if I'm so blessed to live to the age of 111 that I'll have a whole new master story to think of at that point. So again, pause 5, 10 minutes, try to figure that out. So again, assuming you've paused, that's our spiritual autobiography activity. Again, going into the topics of a timeline, again, birth date, year of expected death, where you're at on that timeline, discussing the life functions in space, that's the process map, that all life is meeting others, again, talking about 3 or 4 people who had the greatest impact, the experiences shape your religious faith. Number 5 being that we live in communities. Number 6, that we are choosing creatures. Number 7, joy and sorrow. And number 8, the master story. I'm going to end this video shortly, but I will say again, if for copyright reasons, I don't want to share my screen on this part because this part was mostly Richard S. Gilbert's work. Um, but I'm happy to share with you a version if you want to contact me. Um, And I would say if you can find the book, purchase the book. Um, if not, again, email me if you have any questions. Um, Again, the next series I'll post up online and we can have that conversation. But I hope you've taken today, again, with 8 sections, 5 segments each. So you've taken an hour to do this initially, but then take your time to write your spiritual autobiography. Get it to a place where you'll be willing to share it with others. Um, but then again, don't let that stop your spiritual autobiography. Let that be something you build towards for the rest of your life. If you have any questions, email me, contact Lush Community. Like, who knows? You might be seeing this video in 10 years and it might have a different minister. Who knows? um, but again, I'm here for you all. Much love. Good luck on your spiritual journey. Thank you for listening today. Have a good day. Take care. Many blessings. Bye bye.